come until that mosque is raised and the temple is rebuilt. Fundamentalist Christians think Jesus won't come back until that mosque is raised and the temple is rebuilt. And Muslims the world over take an exquisite interest in the integrity of that mosque. It's considered the third holiest site in the Muslim world. It really is not an exaggeration to say that if anything happens to that building, the wheels come off. I mean, it really could be. There's a piece of architecture that could precipitate World War III. It's considered so sacred, and the Muslims, incidentally, have the same kind of eschatology. I mean, there's slight differences. Incidentally, Jesus is going to come back and preach Islam, but this idea that the world is going to end, and it is going to end in your generation, very likely, and that its ending somehow is a good thing because it is the necessary precursor to the best thing. That's a very scary belief, and it is not a fringe belief. Perhaps you guys remember this, but Reagan brought Hal Lindsey, a religious lunatic of the first order, and Jerry Falwell, a lunatic of the second order, perhaps, in to brief the Pentagon on the implications of biblical prophecy for our strategic situation vis-a-vis the Soviet Union. Okay, this is not and the current administration. While I'm not a fan of the president's, I don't think who knows what he believes, but he doesn't strike me as a Pat Robertson character. The fact that Pat Robertson could even aspire to launch a presidential campaign should terrify us. And the fact that people like him and Dobson, more relevantly at the moment, have the ear of those in power and can exact concessions from those in power. And that we have people like Tom DeLay who say that they came into the business of government to forward a biblical worldview. These beliefs are operative, and they are fundamentally hostile to our creating a durable future for ourselves.
Now, it's true, we had a speaker, maybe 3 speakers ago, who came from a scientific point of view and was offering a different kind of end time. So what do you think of the faith that a coming technological singularity will be an apocalyptic event in the next 50 years?
You must be speaking about Ray Kurzweil.
Yes, I am.
I have not read his book, so I can't really comment on that thesis. The idea that our exponential advances in technology could transform human society in a way that is presently unthinkable, it seems to me there are good reasons to believe that. And it's what the time frame is and what transformations are likely. That's certainly a subject for reasonable debate. The issue, though, is there are many scientific ideas that are fantastically strange, far even stranger than the idea that somebody was born of a virgin or is coming back, or that there's an omniscient being who can hear your prayers. I mean, those are strange ideas. But Martin Rees, the royal astronomer, recently wrote that because this thesis in physics of inflation, this idea that there could be myriad bubble universes and all functioning by different laws, and that basically everything that could be tried has been tried. This bequeaths the notion that you should expect that there are, with this many universes, that there are going to be many, many civilizations far more advanced than our own, and that these super intelligent beings will have invented computation, and that their computation will be so powerful that they'll be able to simulate whole universes in their computers. And almost by definition, these simulated universes will outnumber real universes. And therefore, we should expect to find ourselves in a simulation rather than in a real universe. Now, this is a very weird idea, and I mean, it suggests to me, one thing that it suggests to me is that physics has now become so rarefied that it's almost impossible to know when a physicist is joking. But the important thing to point out is that there's a difference between having reasons to believe this and having no reasons. And one thing we maintain in scientific discourse, no matter how weird it gets at the peripheries, is an intellectual honesty where when we're certain about something, we claim we're certain. When we're not certain, we don't claim we're certain. And the pressure to vet ideas and to jettison dogma wherever you can find it is exquisite in science, and it is non-existent in Orthodox religion.
By the way, that question was from Mark L. We kind of like to use names here. This is a question from Amber. If you want to raise your hand, you can. From all the feedback you've received on your book or in person at a talk like this one, what comment or question has shifted your perspective the most from what you originally wrote or said?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if there's one comment. One thing that I did just before the book was published is I created a website, and the difference between having done that and not doing it, it was so extraordinary because I've just had thousands of emails, but for the website, I would have no idea who was reading the book and what their response was. And I mean, the emails have just come from the craziest range of people. I mean, there are the ministers in the South still practicing as ministers but have completely lost their faith and just can't figure out what other job they're qualified for. They've written me. Then there are people who... I mean, one thing that's interesting, and I didn't have to write my book to discover this. I mean, you spend long enough in academia, you discover this. In fact, you discover this nowhere so readily as in a philosophy seminar. People very rarely change their minds. I mean, I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen someone undergo a full change of perspective, just fully blown in real time. Oh my God, I didn't see it that way. I repudiate everything I was talking about a moment ago. And those are like supernova explosions in the universe. Those rarely happen. And bearing witness to that, I mean, just seeing how intractable our attachment is to religious mythology, even by very smart people. I mean, I get the same objections over and over again. It's really the whole notion of a meme is very compelling when you see the same language and the same why is not coming to you from very disparate sources, coming reflexively. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's an adequate answer to that question.
So have you changed your mind about anything?
Oh, good question. Well, I'm open-minded. I mean, one thing that's come to me that is a doubt that is creeping into my discourse on this subject is I don't know what the normative response would be to our situation. I mean, I'm advocating something. I'm advocating what I've come to call a conversational intolerance, where we apply the same standards of reasonableness on questions about God and ethics and the afterlife that we apply on every other subject. But I clearly would not want the President of the United States to speak the way I just spoke. You know, that would be so inflammatory. I mean, just take the Muslim world as I mean, let's say we completely put our house in order domestically, and the 260 million Americans who claim to be certain that they have a relationship with God change their minds and thought just the way I thought, then we still have an immense problem. How do we speak reasonably in the face of the religious polarities in our world? And I'm starting to feel that I simply don't know, and I don't know how steep the honesty curve should be. And I'm the first to admit that I am not the face of diplomacy on this subject. And so that has been brought home to me. It's been hammered into me over these many months.
Here's a question from Wayne Welch. Again, if you want to identify. What accounts for the resurgence of religious literalism, fundamentalism in the U.S. since the era of the Scopes monkey trial, say, since 1920s?
Yeah, there's certainly the perception that there's a resurgence, and I think there is a political empowerment, even under the current administration, that appears to be new. I can't untangle just how much I'm just paying attention to it more and how much it's always been there. But as far as what people believe, that has been remarkably stable ever since Scopes. The Gallup polling goes back about 70 or 80 years, and on questions like, do you think Satan literally exists? Do you think Jesus was literally born of a virgin? Many, many questions. The percentages just tick, within the margin of error through the decades. It's not like we have suddenly produced many fundamentalists who weren't there 70 years ago.
This is a question from, I can't read your writing, but it's maybe a Noah. Whatever else can be said about religion, it does provide an emotional component, happiness and hope. Science does not have as much emotional impact because we dismiss emotions as irrational. What can we do to focus the discussion on the emotional benefits of science instead of the irrational drawbacks of religion?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the first thing to point out is that science has just fundamentally not addressed questions of human happiness for most of its career. Now there is a conception of positive psychology. Now people are asking questions about human happiness in normative states in neuroscience and in psychology. There are people doing neuroimaging work on compassion, for instance. But this is a really recent development, and therefore, religion has seemed to be the only game in town all these years, even with the steady encroach of a scientific worldview that has beaten back religious ignorance on every other subject. There was a time where you have epilepsy, really, but nobody knows what epilepsy is, so the diagnosis is demonic possession, right? Well, now that's not such a common diagnosis, and we understand that when people are having seizures, there's another reason for it. There has to be an analogous breakthrough on questions of happiness and on questions of spiritual experience, and it's just, it's in the offing because the effort simply has not been made. Another thing I'd like to say in address to that question is that this idea that somehow our religious affiliations, our religious beliefs are doing a lot of work for us. They're really consoling and they're underwriting morality in some way. This is largely disproved by just the character of belief in Western Europe. Western Europe bears almost no resemblance to the United States in terms of the level of religious adherence. And if you look at the UN indices of a society's health, you look at per capita income, literacy, homicide rates, rates of other violent crime, every index of a society's health, the most atheistic societies in the world are the best off. Societies like Iceland and Sweden and Australia and Denmark and the Netherlands. These are, in Sweden, something like 80% of people claim to be atheists. Here, 83% claim to believe that Jesus literally rose from the dead. So the idea that somehow this belief system is paying such great dividends in terms of our treating one another well in this society, that remains to be proven. That said, it is true that if you really believe that death is only